Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Finance Committee regular meeting for Monday, September 23rd, 2019. The first item on today's agenda is approval of the August 26th Public Works Finance Committee meeting minutes.
The minutia look good.
Yeah, seems fine to me.
Too.
We'll approve that, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 2 is a public meeting on a proposed lot line division at 212 East 6th Street. Mike Ray's going to point out what's going on there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike.
So this would be a lot division request on behalf of the applicants Rod and Jenny Story. And this is the property, a little over 11,500 square feet in size. You can see Washington Street heading north here on the west, and then 6th Street to the south. Currently contains a medical office building here and a 4-unit apartment complex on the west side adjacent to Washington Street. That's the Moscow Food Co-op. We've got Chang Sing Restaurant to the north, American Insurance here in the southeast corner, a professional office building here, and various other residential uses, church use here. Looking at the zoning configuration, it's in the central business zoning district as well as almost all the surrounding properties. It does transition into the R4, which is multifamily residential here to the southeast of 6th and Jefferson. This would be a record of survey on the property, so you can see the office here to the east and then the fourplex here to the west. This would be the proposed lot configuration, so there'd be a lot line proposed running north-south here to divide the property. And this would be a closer view, closer aerial view, so 11,521 square feet in size after the division. The westernmost parcel would be 4,992 square feet, and the easternmost would be 6,529 square feet in size. We did post the site 7 days in advance, and everybody within 600 feet has been notified of the proposed meeting here. And the staff's recommendation is to take public comment if applicable and recommend approval of the lot division. And we previously had a one condition on there, but a couple hours prior to the meeting, there was indication that they'd found the 2 separate sewer lines, and so they don't share a common sewer line anymore, as we once thought. And so there's no need for the condition anymore. We're just recommending approval of the lot division request as proposed. So I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Is there any requirement for setback for this kind of property in central business?
Yeah, I should have covered that. There's no minimum lot size, minimum lot width, or setback requirements in central business. So as such, these properties would meet all the requirements.
No parking issues either since it's central business, right? So,
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
I really don't see anything wrong with this, but I would entertain any comment from the public if anybody's here that wants to speak to that. Doesn't look like anybody but staff and Victoria's here, so, and Garrett, so probably not. Yeah, I guess I have no problem with it. You guys see anything?
I don't see any impediments.
I think we can
say go
consent
ahead.
agenda this one.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Item number 3 on today's agenda is the Finley Buttes Limited Partnership Contract for Long Haul and Disposable Solid Waste. And Tim's going to go through the 77 pages of documentation we have
Verbatim.
on this.
Just going to start reading. Whereas.
Well, good afternoon. You want me to start, Gary?
That'd be great.
Prior to exercising the final 5-year option remaining on the original 1993 contract for transportation and disposal of municipal solid waste, City Council authorized staff to issue a request for a proposal on January 10th, 2018 as an opportunity to competitively test the market for a longer-term contract. 2 proposals were received, and after evaluation, the proposal from Finley Buttes Limited Partnership, which is also a subsidiary of Waste Connections, who is our current contractor for transportation and disposal, was determined to be the most favorable, and on April 16th, 2018, City Council directed staff to negotiate an agreement with Finley Buttes Limited Partnership. Staff pursued negotiations since that time, and during this period, the city of Moscow requested and was granted 3 different 30-day extensions of time required to give notification to Waste Connections of its intent to exercise the remaining 5-year option of the original 1993 contract. As negotiations on the new agreement were uncertain, the city exercised that final 5-year option while continuing the negotiation process until just recently when both parties agreed to the proposed agreement that's before you today. The parties agree that the proposed contract will meet the needs of both the city of Moscow and Findlay Buttes Limited Partnership. General terms of the proposed agreement consist of an initial 7-year term with the city of Moscow having sole discretion to exercise 2 separate and additional 5-year options. These terms allow the city the flexibility to pursue other potential future disposal opportunities should they arise, while also positioning the city comfortably for its MSW disposal well into the future. Annual rate adjustments will be based on the CPI, and they'll use 80% of the fluctuation of the annual CPI. The base rate under the proposed agreement will begin at $52.77 per ton for transportation and disposal, which is a difference of $1.17 per ton under the current contract.
$1.17 more?
Yes.
Okay.
Gary?
The only, Tim, I think, you've done a good job of laying out the particulars. We issued the RFP, and then we ran into some, shall we say, differences in negotiation. The contractor wanted to have a fuel peg or a inflationary adjustment for fuel alone, fluctuating with the price of fuel, which was one of the things that, although the council in the past has granted extraordinary relief to the long-haul contractor, the contract itself does not mandate that we do that. And we wanted to protect that same process going forward. So it took us probably 3 months to get that figured out. And our RFP, by the way, specifically called out and said that we would not entertain bids that had a fuel peg in them. And Findlay Buttes Limited Partnership's response did not have any fluctuation in there. So we spent quite a bit of time doing that. After that, this contract, which was built basically on the contract we negotiated in 1993 with Waste Management, was the template for this contract. So there were some terms in there that Findlay Buttes did not want to have in there. They were essentially business privacy type things, things as simple as showing us insurance policies instead of certificates indicating that they had insurance policies, those sorts of things. Business is getting a lot more, protective of that information. Now, the contract calls that there shall be these provisions in your insurance policy and what they call an accord certificate, which is essentially a declarations page of coverage that they have, will have that all, but the individual contract terms of the insurance policy apparently have some significance to Findlay Buttes. Then there were some operational things regarding access to the site. Should we not, if trailers weren't delivered in a timely fashion to the site, we wanted to make sure that services were protected and guaranteed, mainly because a couple of months ago, close to a year, I suppose,
Last year.
Whitman County transfer station caught fire because of the accumulation of garbage on the tipping floor. We wanted to make sure that didn't happen to us. So we talked about that, worked through that. It was a negotiated process. The city didn't get everything it wanted, neither did Findlay Buttes, but what this does is it gives us a omnibus sanitation system until 2035. And depending on what we do, possibly 2036, because when we were negotiating this, it was 2018. Now it's 2019, and the mayor, with his eagle eye for a contract, saw that the commencement date was October 1st of 2018, which is almost 12 months in the past. So we will adjust that. We'll call Findlay Buttes to determine if they want to do the 5 years dating from October of 2019, or do they want to go an initial 6-year term and then 2 5-year terms? We originally timed this out so that the long haul and disposal contract would coincide with our collection contract from Latah Sanitation. So, council, should they decide to move forward with this, we will have essentially a sanitation system in place with regulated rates until 2035, which, if I can add my personal opinion, Tim, I think, has done a really good job of managing this. We have very competitive sanitation rates, and I think it definitely is something that staff recommends we move forward with.
So if I remember when the single stream can color fiasco went on, we extended LSI's contract to 30-something. I can't remember.
2035.
So it coincides.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that. Also remember Finley Buttes had a representative here last when we talked to that, and I was pretty impressed with with their presentation on how they're collecting methane and using that from the site to fuel an onion drying plant that's close by, and so environmentally, I think it's probably the best option we have. So.
Yeah, I think it looked good, and the price with the inflation on it as well, also well done, and I like the long-term stability that it provides especially. And other than whether it's 2018 or 19, which I guess will be resolved before the ink gets dried.
We'll have that information in time for council on the 7th.
Something I noticed in the contract that non-allowable waste, electronic waste, televisions, computers, that sort of thing. How do we deal with that?
We
Since they're
accept
sorted out?
electronic waste at Moscow Recycling Center and have for years. Oregon landfills no longer by law can accept that type of material. We put an electronic recycling program in, I think it was 2010. It was shortly after I started with the city.
So if people
residents
haul them
can-
to the dump, to the transfer station,
Down to the recycling center.
but if they end up in somebody's load of trash, how do they get sorted out?
Well, they don't, for one thing.
So some of
They
it's
don't accept it.
slipping through
And
the
tell them,
cracks.
take it down to Moscow Recycling where they're set up to deal with the material, and then it gets hauled off periodically by
Do you
a
know where it
contractor.
goes?
I'm not certain the contractor they're using. It used to be a contractor out of Spokane that came down, and I'm not certain if they switch contractors or not.
They essentially disassemble them, get the precious metals out, and then they get it to the point where the stuff that is regulated they can deal with, and the stuff that's just garbage, such as the plastic cases, get landfilled.
We just don't know who does that.
Yeah.
I'd just be interested to know how they do that. Just personal interest. That has nothing to do with this contract. Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I think that we'll recommend approval, and I probably should put it on the regular agenda.
Okay. Will do, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
Now we have a report at the end of our meeting here about the situation at the roof at the Water Department building. It looks kind of permeable.
Good afternoon. Gary asked that staff provide a report on the status of the repairs to that building, so I'll give you a little bit of background here to begin with. As you may recall, the city leased that building for a number of years from the prior owner, and then in 2016, the owner expressed that they intended to sell the property and provided an offer to the city to purchase the property. It is located directly adjacent to the filter plant and the water production facility, and that provides a good synergy between this property and the water operations next door. At that time, the city was aware that there was some water damage that was visible near the buttress there on the southwest corner of the building, and had the building inspected by a structural engineer to assess the repairs that would be required. Felt that we had that well in hand at that point in time. After completion of the inspection, appraisals, and negotiation, the city did end up purchasing the property in 2018. And then after purchase of the building, city staff worked to arrange work of various contractors for improvements that were necessary, including the structural repairs and a new roof installation, some carpet replacement, and some HVAC repairs that had been anticipated prior to the city purchasing the property. During the initial phase of demolition of the lower roof areas to allow for the beam repair, we did have more extensive damage than what had been previously anticipated, and we did have a perimeter beam that dropped somewhat unexpectedly out of the steel pocket that was containing it. That necessitated us to install some temporary cribbing to support that beam and the rest of the roof structure until permanent repairs could be made. At that point in time, it was also discovered that the roof insulation contained asbestos. It did require some abatement activity to happen to address that on the building as well. So the building roof is unique, as everybody is aware. It is a hyperparabolic paraboloid, so that is where you can create a very unique curved structure using somewhat straight linear members. So the roof structure is really made up by two layers of tongue and groove, 1-inch cedar tongue and groove decking that is curved in really two different directions across the roof structure. It's secured by these perimeter glulam beams that are hidden behind the metal flashing on the edges, and then those beams are connected together at the upper points and then secured to the two concrete buttresses on the opposing corners. It is somewhat of a unique roof structure. It does allow for essentially it to be a freestanding roof without needing any supporting structure underneath it. But it also makes it somewhat of a unique structure to repair when these connecting corners and glulam beams have that deterioration and structural failure. That did require additional work once that extent of damage was discovered, once everything was uncovered. It did take quite a bit of additional work by our structural engineer to assess what they felt would be the best fix to the structure to remedy the damage that had occurred and any potential weakening of that cedar decking that occurred as that beam dropped slightly and placed that under stress. So this is just kind of a picture of the beam here that was discovered after this. I think this last 2x6 on top. There was one actually on top of that. That was the last thing kind of holding it together. Previously, this beam was secured into that steel plate that was then attached to the buttress. So you can see the extent of deterioration and rot that occurred. There had been prior repairs. Actually, the beam comes in opposite this corner already had supplemental steel reinforcement that had been installed, and that was really the anticipated scope of the repair to this side. And if you go to the other corner of the building, one of the beams also had fairly substantial steel supports that have been put in place in the past at some point in time. This is probably not the best design with respect to roof drainage to drain all the roof down to this corner, and then if that drainage system is not working properly at those corners, it does present a great deal of water in the vicinity of those beams and their attachment to the buttresses. So there's some temporary sheathing. This is where we had really the fairly extensive deck rot was down here in the corner. That beam I showed you was this beam here located on the south side of the building that had the most substantial settlement and some temporary reinforcement. This is the cedar decking you see here in the corner and some OSB that had been placed over top just to prevent anybody from falling through the hole. The decking here was pretty well rotted out in the corner of the roof structure. This is our contractor working now to install ice and water shield. We'll talk about here in a little bit more detail to give a more weatherproof surface to the structure. And we also discovered during the roof removal that there was a fair amount of electrical work that had been run on top of the roof decking, so it was insulated around and then roofed over. That served many of the ceiling light fixtures that existed in the building, so we needed to demolish those and take those circuits out as well. So for current status, the asbestos abatement was completed on September 6th. Unfortunately, that abatement did require us to remove the rest of the roof. That was covered with kind of a temporary plastic sheeting that was used to cover the structure, but that will not be something that would be suitable certainly to carry the building through the winter months. During recent rainfall events, we have had water intrusion into the building in several locations, and the beams have continued to settle and flex slightly over the last month or so. We did make the decision to remove employees from the building due to the leaking roof, the roof movement, and anticipated construction disturbance and noise that we will have happening as we get into the structural repair work. But I would like to reassure that our structural engineer has indicated that it's not, it is still structurally sound. It does not present a risk to the public. It's just the way that roof structure is made, it is kind of spring-loaded with the curved cedar 1-bys. And so it just settles a little bit and moves on its own, especially as you start unweighting it. So once you took the roofing material and the weight that presented, or you have people walking on it, it tends to flex a little bit, and that's normal. If you walk on it, it kind of bounces like a trampoline, because it is this woven cedar 1-bys that are curved that creates the structural strength of the building. So while those beams have moved a little bit, it is still structurally sound and retains its structural stability. Our framing contractor is currently working on removing the rest of the plastic sheeting and the flashing over the beams to allow for the full inspection of the decking and the exterior glulam beams by our structural engineer. That was a condition underneath the scope of the design work, was that the engineer needed to field verify the extent of wood areas that needed to be repaired or removed. So we're getting that work completed. Once that inspection is finished, then the contractor will be covering the building with ice and water shield, which is what you saw on that prior picture, to serve as a temporary roofing surface. It really would help us. It'll help us keep water out of the building over the course of the winter. Once that protection is in place, then they'll begin work on the glulam beam repair and the corner decking repairs to finish the structural work. But the challenge we are having is due to the late time of year and the weather conditions. It's probably not going to be suitable for us to work to get the new roof installed. We'll have new insulation, 2 layers of insulation, plus the roof membrane itself to be installed, and we want to make sure that we have good weather conditions, that we don't expose the insulation to water damage, and that we have appropriate temperatures for all of the roofing membrane sealants to seal and work properly. As a result, we do expect the building will be unoccupied until weather conditions and temperatures are suitable for the new roof insulation and new roof membrane installation to happen in early next year. So we've temporarily relocated the environmental services staff to the annex on 3rd Street. So we did a little bit of a shuffle. We had some engineering staff members in there that we brought back over to the man building. So everybody's bunking up in the man building, and then we brought ESG into the annex, and then there are additional water staff employees, I think 3 additional water staff employees that moved from the water building then to the water production building next door. So everybody has found a home. And has temporary quarters that I'm expecting will probably carry us through here for the next 6 months or so until we get the building completed. As I mentioned, structural repairs will take several weeks to complete. Once we get that completed, then we can remove the temporary cribbing. That'd be nice to get the blocking and the chains off the building. There will be some additional electrical work that had not been anticipated previously since we encountered those conduits up on top of the roof. We'll need to get that rerouted probably to surface mount inside the building to those light fixtures that were previously served to reestablish lighting to the building. So with that, that's the report for you this afternoon. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
So we anticipate having the structural deficiencies remedied before winter really sets in? Okay.
Do you have to order custom glulam replacement beams for
We
those?
We do, and that's part of the removal of the flashing and determining the extent of the rot would then allow us the contractor to understand what length of glulam beams they need to order. There's also custom steel that Mondays will be providing to the project that also need to be ordered as well. So there's a couple week lead time on materials, but that's currently underway.
So you replace the entire beams or just the pieces just as far as they're rotted out and then flange them with steel?
The initial estimate was about 12 feet of the lower beam that would be replaced until the full beam could be inspected. So there will be portions of the old that will be cut out, the new that will be put in, offsetting with a 4-foot offset joint between the top and lower, and then there'll be steel on the side that will bolt it all
Clamp
together.
together.
Correct.
Seems like it's doable.
There's one aspect of the repair that after this beam settlement, the structural engineer was recommending covering that roof deck with 2 layers of 1/2-inch plywood to help reinforce that cedar diaphragm. The contractor does have concerns and questions about the constructability of doing that, essentially getting that plywood to conform to the curvature of that roof structure, so we're going to work through those details. The primary focus is to get the beams repaired, the corner decking repaired, and then if upon inspection the cedar decking is still in good shape, we may be able to omit that plywood sheeting. That is something we're still going to be reviewing over the course of the next several weeks.
So as part of this whole thing, there's a space that's kind of only has like a 4-foot ceiling in there underneath the low part of the roof. Is that going to be part of this project to make that a storage room or something?
At this point, we've not discussed that scope of the project. We're just trying to get that structural repair and the roof installed. I'm not sure if that has been discussed or has that been considered.
Yeah, it'd be,
Electrical place where you could run electrical things for
yeah,
the lighting.
anticipating the electrical work and the extent of the repairs. If the repairs are to the point that we have to invade that space for some way, we'll make it as usable as we can at that time.
Well, it seemed that the electrical that's on the roof was there because they didn't want that inside on the walls when it was a bank.
Yep.
But we don't care about that, so it should be not that hard for us to run conduit on the walls inside, eh?
No, it should be fairly
We don't have to
straightforward.
tear out the sheetrock and hide that.
No, it'll be just attached to
Yeah.
the bottom of the cedar decking. That does have the exposed cedar decking. That is the ceiling finish in the building, and that's what the fixtures were attached to. We would just run surface mount conduit to feed those. And we can match them we can paint the conduits to match the decking color so that they're less visible.
Meeting the code.
Oh, man, what a mess, but it needs
Well.
fixing. And the roof is
Well,
kind of unique.
it's not all,
It
it's not
is.
entirely a surprise. We knew there was something there. It's just a little more extensive than
Yeah.
originally anticipated. Yeah.
And just it's taken longer to design the fix because of the unique roof structure.
Is there a point at which you will say, let's get rid of this roof and try a new one?
It is so integral to that building because, it does not require structural support from the interior walls. You would have to do fairly significant reconstruction to put a different roof structure on it. At this point in time, I don't think we're at that level. I don't expect we'll get there.
Good. Okay.
It's not a scrape off, right?
It's not a scrape everything off.
I mean, initially, the structural repairs were $30,000. We're expecting that to go up somewhat, but depending upon whether we have to do the plywood sheathing or not, it may not be dramatically more. And so it'll be much more cost-effective to repair and to reinstall the new roof than to actually look at doing something more dramatic, where we'd probably be looking at, several $100,000s to do that.
I like the roof. I just, at some point, you gotta say, but I'm glad you can fix it.
Okay. Thank you for the update, sir. Good to know what's going on. People ask because they see the cribbing and want to know if it's going to fall in the street or not.
We hope not.
A strong wind lifted up.
Okay, that's the last item on our agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's adjourn.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.